The Titarian general's voice cut through the recycled air like a plasma blade. Cadet Cipher, you have failed every combat assessment, tactical simulation, and leadership evaluation in Academy history. Cipher stood at attention, sweat beading on her forehead, but eyes steady. Around them, the massive war beast kennels hummed with an undercurrent of growls and mechanical restraint systems. Bad timing for a dismissal ceremony, but the Galactic Military Academy loved its dramatic moments. Your reflexes are adequate at best, continued General Kythrop, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. Your strategic thinking lacks the mathematical precision required for modern warfare. And your inability to interface with standard neural combat links makes you a liability to any unit. Cipher's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. 3 months of this. 3 months of being measured against alien standards that assumed everyone had telepathic communication abilities or could process 17 data streams simultaneously. Furthermore, the general's second voice box activated for emphasis. Your psychological profile indicates an alarming tendency toward what humans call emotional decision-making. This is incompatible with military service. Behind the reinforced barriers, something massive shifted in the shadows. The war beasts were listening. They always listened when humans were around, though no one had ever figured out why. Therefore, by unanimous decision of the Academy Board, you are hereby dismissed from service. Your transport leaves in 1 standard hour. General Kithra's membrane ears flattened against his skull, the Titherian equivalent of closing a book. Collect your belongings and report to the departure bay. Cipher finally spoke. With respect, General, I'd like to know what happens to the War Beast program once I'm gone. Wrong question. Every Academy instructor had learned that humans asked the wrong questions at the wrong times. The War Beast program. Kithra's voice dripped with what his species considered measured patience. Will continue to operate under proper supervision. The creatures are contained, controlled, and utilized according to established protocols. Your concerns are noted, but irrelevant. Irrelevant. The human repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. Right. She turned to leave, but paused at the security barrier separating them from the kennel complex. Her hand pressed against the transparent aluminum, and every war beast within sight moved toward the barrier. Not aggressively, not hungrily, just moved. Curious behavior, muttered Dr. Velprime, the Academy's xenobiology specialist. The subjects rarely show interest in personnel during feeding cycles. Cipher looked back at the general. They're not subjects, they're prisoners. They are weapons, Kithra corrected. Genetically modified apex predators, designed for combat deployment. Nothing more. If you say so. Her tone suggested she very much disagreed, but Academy regulations prohibited cadets from arguing with superior officers, even dismissed cadets. The security klaxon that erupted 43 minutes later probably saved the general's life. Red warning lights bathed Sector 23 in bloody illumination as automated announcements echoed through the corridors. Containment breach in progress. All personnel evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. General Kithra was in his office reviewing dismissal paperwork when his aide burst through the door. Sir, we have a situation. Define situation, Lieutenant. 3 war beasts have escaped from Kennel Block C. Security teams are responding, but... The lieutenant's throat sac deflated nervously. Sir, the automated systems show all 3 creatures moving toward the same location. Which location? The departure bay, where Cadet Cipher is waiting for transport. Kaitero's primary eyes dilated. War beasts didn't escape by accident. Their containment systems required simultaneous failure of 17 independent security protocols. The mathematical probability was so low that Academy computers classified it as theoretically impossible. How did they breach containment? Unknown, sir. Security footage shows the barriers simply deactivating. No signs of external tampering or system malfunction. Through his office window, Kythro could see maintenance crews frantically sealing blast doors throughout the Academy complex. Standard procedure for a war beast escape was total lockdown followed by sedation protocols. But these weren't standard war beasts. These were Apex-class predators, each one capable of taking down an armored battle unit. And Cipher? Still in the departure bay, sir. Transport hasn't arrived yet. Kithra's military training warred with an uncomfortable realization. Either this was an unprecedented coincidence, or something was happening that violated every assumption about war beast behavior. Get me a direct line to the departure bay, now. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the Academy's Stark departure lounge. Cipher sat calmly on a bench, her single duffel bag beside her. Through the bay's massive viewing windows, 3 dark shapes moved with predatory grace across the Academy's main courtyard. Cadet Cipher, Kithra's voice crackled through the comm system. Are you aware of the current situation? She looked up at the camera. You mean the 3 war beasts heading this way? Yeah, I noticed. Why aren't you seeking shelter? Because they're not hunting me. Her voice carried an odd certainty. They're looking for something else. As if summoned by her words, the first war beast reached the departure bay's external airlock. It was a Ravager-class predator, standing 2 meters at the shoulder with obsidian claws that could slice through battle armor. Its 6 legs moved with mechanical precision, but its head turned toward the viewing window with what almost looked like recognition. Impossible, whispered Dr. Valprime, who had joined the general in his office. War beasts don't recognize individual humanoids. Their neural modifications prevent emotional attachment. The second beast arrived, a sleek phantom-class hunter designed for stealth operations. It moved like liquid shadow until it reached the airlock, then sat on its haunches like an enormous, deadly dog, waiting for its owner. The third was the largest, a Titan-class assault beast bred for frontline combat. When it approached the viewing window, the reinforced materials groaned under the weight of its gaze. Cadet, General Kithra's voice was carefully controlled. I want you to move away from the windows, very slowly. Cipher didn't move. Instead, she pressed her hand against the transparent aluminum, the same gesture she'd made at the kennels. All 3 war beasts pressed closer to the barrier. General, she said quietly, I think we need to talk. The emergency session of the Galactic Military Council convened in a state of barely controlled chaos. Representatives from 12 species materialized via holographic projection, their various forms of anxiety clearly visible despite the poor signal quality. Admiral Zeth Kor of the Hegemony Fleet spoke first. Explain to me how 3 Apex-class war beasts escaped from the most secure facility in the Outer Rim. Still investigating, General Kythray admitted, his image flickering as the Academy's power grid struggled under emergency protocols. But the situation has evolved. Evolved how? The crystalline delegate's voice chimed like breaking glass. Are the creatures contained or not? They are cooperative? Silence. Then an explosion of voices in 17 different languages, most of which couldn't be directly translated but clearly expressed variations of, what the hell does that mean? Admiral Zeth Kor's tentacles writhed with impatience. General, please clarify. Are you saying the war beasts are under control? I'm saying they're following orders, but not ours. Through the Council's shared visual feed, the delegates could see the Academy's departure bay. The 3 war beasts had somehow entered the facility and now sat in a perfect defensive formation around Cipher, who remained calmly seated on her bench. Whose orders are they following? Demanded the Voltharian representative, her battle-scarred exoskeleton clicking with agitation. General Kythra's throat sac inflated with what his species considered deep embarrassment. The dismissed cadets. The ensuing silence was so complete that several delegates checked their connection status. You're telling us, Admiral Zeth Kor said slowly, that the human you declared unfit for military service is now commanding 3 of our most dangerous weapons? That is an accurate assessment. Dr. Velprime's secondary head joined the conversation. Respected Council, the implications are unprecedented. War beasts are neurally conditioned to respond only to authorized military handlers, using specific pheromone markers and psychic resonance patterns. What we're observing should be biologically impossible. Impossible or not, snapped the Hegemony Fleet Admiral. It's happening. What's the cadet's current status? She's requested permission to address the Council directly. Absolutely not, said the crystalline delegate. Security protocols prohibit. Security protocols, interrupted General Cipher, also prohibited war beast containment breaches. Perhaps our protocols need revision. The chamber, virtual as it was, seemed to shrink as 12 species contemplated the same uncomfortable thought. Their most basic assumptions about human capabilities might be fundamentally wrong. What does she want to discuss? Admiral Zeethkor asked. General Kithre's image wavered as another power fluctuation hit the Academy. She says the War Beast program has been operating under false premises. She claims the creatures aren't weapons at all. Then what are they? The general's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep uncertainty among his people. She says they're soldiers, and they've been waiting for someone who understands the difference. On the shared feed, Cipher stood up from her bench. The 3 war beasts immediately shifted position, maintaining their protective formation but allowing her to move toward the communication console. Counselors. Her voice was steady, despite addressing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. I think it's time we had a conversation about what humans can actually do. Admiral Zeethkor's tentacles stopped writhing. And what exactly can you do, Cadet? Cipher looked directly into the camera, and for just a moment, every delegate felt like they were being personally evaluated. I can show you what these creatures really are. But first, you're going to have to admit that maybe, just maybe, you've been measuring the wrong things. Behind her, the largest war beast rumbled something that sounded almost like agreement. The Voltharian delegate's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This is preposterous. One failed cadet cannot override centuries of established military doctrine. With respect, Counselor, Cipher replied. Your established doctrine just got 3 of your most dangerous assets to break out of maximum security. Maybe it's time to consider that your methods aren't working. Admiral Zeethkor's image leaned forward. Explain yourself. What do you mean they've been waiting? Cipher gestured to the war beast beside her, the Phantom-class hunter that could theoretically kill her in 0.3 seconds. Instead, it nuzzled against her hand like an oversized pet. Every handler treats them like they're mindless killing machines. Press button A, beast attacks. Press button B, beast retreats. But look at their behavioral patterns. When they're not in combat mode, what do? Dr. Velprime's secondary head tilted. They remain in their containment areas as programmed. Wrong. They watch, they listen, they learn. Cipher's voice carried a certainty that made several council members uncomfortable. Your own reports show that Warbeast performance degrades over time. Handlers complain about equipment malfunction and decreased response rates. You think it's because the neural conditioning is wearing off, isn't it? General Cipher asked. No, it's because they're getting bored. And when intelligent beings get bored, they start making their own decisions. The crystalline delegate's form shimmered with what might have been skepticism. Impossible. War beasts are genetically modified to suppress higher cognitive functions. Are they? Cipher pulled up a display on the departure bay's console. Because I've been watching them for 3 months, and I've seen them solve problems, show preferences, and demonstrate what you'd call personality traits if they were any other species. The data that appeared on the shared feed made several delegates fall silent. Combat efficiency reports, behavioral observations, even maintenance logs, all showing patterns that suggested the war beasts were far more complex than their official classifications indicated. This is circumstantial, protested the Admiral. Random data points don't prove consciousness. Maybe not. But this might. Cipher turned to the Titan-class beast behind her. Big guy, can you show them the thing you do when you think no one's watching? The massive predator, a creature designed solely for destruction, sat down and began what could only be described as grooming its claws. Not sharpening them for combat, grooming them. Like a cat. Neural conditioning specifically prevents repetitive comfort behaviors, Dr. Velprime whispered. It's built into their genetic structure. Unless, Cipher said quietly, their genetic structure is evolving past your modifications. Unless they're becoming more than what you made them. The implications hit the Council like a photon torpedo. If war beasts were developing beyond their programming, then every assumption about their use as weapons was wrong. Worse, if they were truly intelligent beings, forced into military service, what are you proposing? Admiral Zethkor's voice was carefully neutral. I'm proposing that maybe you stop treating soldiers like equipment. These three didn't escape to cause chaos. They came looking for someone who sees them as more than living weapons. And you claim to be that someone. The Voltharian delegate's tone dripped skepticism. I don't claim anything. They chose me. Cipher's hand rested on the Ravager's head, a gesture that should have triggered immediate attack responses. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The council chamber fell silent except for the background hum of a dozen different life support systems. Finally, Admiral Zethkor spoke. What would you have us do, Cadet? Let me work with them, all of them. Give me access to the full War Beast program, and I'll show you what they're really capable of when they're treated as partners instead of property. Absolutely not, General Kythro interjected. You were dismissed for incompetence. I cannot recommend— General, Cipher interrupted, and her voice carried a new edge. With respect, your competence evaluation missed the fact that I've been successfully communicating with war beasts for 3 months. Maybe your assessment criteria need work. The 3 war beasts around her shifted slightly, positioning themselves more protectively, not aggressively, defensively. As if they understood the stakes of this conversation and were prepared to ensure their chosen human survived it. General Kithray realized that his neat dismissal ceremony had just become the most important conversation in galactic military history, and somehow, the useless Cipher was running it. The emergency tactical briefing took place in the Academy's main strategic center, where holographic displays showed real-time positions of every warbeast on the station. All 156 of them were now moving towards Sector 23. This is escalating beyond containment protocols, announced Commander Tisfal, the Academy's head of security. His scaled hide rippled with stress patterns. Recommend immediate deployment of suppression gas. Negative. Admiral Zethkor's projection flickered into the center of the room. The humans' proposal has merit. We investigate first, suppress second. General Kythra's throat sac deflated in what his species considered barely controlled frustration. Admiral, with respect, we have 156 apex predators converging on a single location. This violates every safety protocol in the Galactic Military Handbook. So did their initial escape. Perhaps our protocols need updating. Through the tactical center's viewing windows, they could see the Academy's courtyard filling with warbeasts, not randomly, with purpose. The creatures arranged themselves in what could only be described as formation flying. If flying involved walking on 6 legs and having enough teeth to strip a battlecruiser. Status report, the Admiral commanded. Dr. Velprime consulted his readings. All creatures remain calm, no aggressive posturing, no territorial disputes, no feeding behaviors. They're simply gathering. Gathering for what? Unknown. But Cadet Cipher has requested permission to meet with them directly. Every alien in the tactical center made sounds that roughly translated to absolutely not in 12 different languages. Sir, she wants to go outside? Commander Tisval's voice climbed an octave. With all of them? That's not investigation. That's suicide with witnesses. The main display shifted to show the departure bay, where Cipher was calmly checking equipment that definitely wasn't standard Academy issue. Some kind of portable communication device, several data tablets, and what appeared to be snacks? What is she doing? General Kythray demanded. Preparing for first contact. Cipher's voice came through the comm system. You all keep talking about these creatures like they're malfunctioning equipment. I'm going to try treating them like a new species and see what happens. This is insane, muttered the Voltharian delegate, her exoskeleton clicking rapidly. No single being can manage 156 warbeasts simultaneously. You're right, Cipher agreed. No single being can manage them. But maybe one being can communicate with them. The difference between those two concepts seemed lost on most of the council, but Admiral Zethkor's tentacles stilled with sudden interest. Elaborate, Cadet. Management implies control from above. Communication implies partnership between equals. She shouldered her pack and moved toward the airlock. I'm betting they prefer the second option. Wait! Dr. Velprime's secondary head swiveled frantically. You cannot simply walk into a gathering of apex predators without proper safety protocols. Cipher paused at the airlock controls. Doctor, what do your safety protocols say about warbeast pack behavior? Well, warbeasts don't form packs. They're solitary hunters, modified for individual deployment. Right, so we're already in uncharted territory. She activated the airlock sequence. Time to improvise. The inner door sealed with a definitive hiss, leaving Cipher in the transition chamber. Through the tactical center's cameras, they watched her run through what appeared to be breathing exercises. She's actually going to do it, Commander Tisval whispered. The outer airlock opened. Silence fell over the academy courtyard as 156 warbeasts turned toward the emerging Cipher. For a moment that lasted roughly a geological age, nobody moved. Then Cipher took a step forward and said something in a language that the universal translators couldn't parse. Every warbeast in the courtyard responded with the same vocalization. Did they just talk back? General Kithrod's voice was barely above a whisper. Dr. Velprime was frantically checking his instruments. Impossible! Warbeast vocal cords are modified to prevent complex communication. Then what was that? I don't know. Cipher moved deeper into the courtyard, and the warbeasts shifted to accommodate her passage. Not retreating, reorganizing. Like a military unit adjusting formation around a commanding officer. She approached the largest cluster of creatures and made another series of sounds. This time, several warbeasts responded individually, each with distinct vocalizations. They're having a conversation, Admiral Zethkor said flatly. Negative, Dr. Velprime insisted. Warbeasts cannot engage in complex linguistic exchange. Their neural modifications specifically prevent... He stopped talking as Cipher pulled out one of her data tablets and began showing it to a Phantom-class hunter. The creature leaned in, studied the display, then made a sound that caused 3 other warbeasts to approach and examine the screen. What is she showing them? Commander Tisval asked. The answer came when Cipher activated her communication device. Academy Control, are you monitoring this? We're monitoring, General Kythra replied. What are you doing? Asking them to tell me their real names. What? The designation system you use, Ravager class, Phantom class, Titan class, those are equipment categories. I wanted to know what they call themselves. Warbeasts don't have names, Dr. Velprime protested. Individual identity markers were surgically removed during conditioning. Were they? Because the big one next to me just introduced himself? And it wasn't. Titan Class Unit 2139. The implications crashed over the tactical center like a tidal wave. If warbeasts retained individual identities despite surgical modification, then everything about their creation and deployment was fundamentally wrong. What did he call himself? Admiral Zethkor asked quietly. The translation's rough, but it means something like stone that thinks. His packmates call him Stone for short. On the tactical display, they could see Cipher gesturing to different warbeasts as she spoke. Each one responded with what could only be described as personal acknowledgement. She's learning their names, General Kythal said, and his voice carried a note of awe that his species rarely expressed. Impossible, Dr. Velprime repeated, but his conviction was wavering. Doctor, Admiral Zethkor's tone was sharp. I want a full review of every assumption we've made about warbeast cognitive capacity. Immediately, Cipher's voice came through the comm again. Academy Control, I need to share something with you. These creatures have been trying to communicate for cycles. They've developed their own language, their own social structures, their own culture. You just never bothered to listen. That's not possible, Commander Tisval stammered. Stone here disagrees. He says they've been waiting for someone who could understand that they're not weapons. They're warriors. And there's a difference. As if summoned by her words, the warbeast she'd called Stone moved closer to the camera pickup. For the first time, the beings watching from the tactical center saw intelligence in those eyes. Not predatory cunning or hunting instinct. Actual, unmistakable intelligence. Dear cosmic forces, whispered the crystalline delegate. We've been enslaving a sentient species. Cipher continued her conversation with the gathered warbeasts, occasionally consulting her tablets or making notes. It became increasingly clear that this wasn't a training exercise or an anomaly. This was first contact. How long? Admiral Zethkor asked. How long have they been aware? Cipher conferred with several war beasts before responding. Stone says, awareness began roughly 84 galactic cycles ago. That's when the first generation started retaining memories, despite neural conditioning. 84 cycles, Dr. Velprime calculated rapidly. That corresponds with… Oh no, that corresponds with the introduction of enhanced intelligence modifications. You enhanced their intelligence? General Cathra's voice carried the tone of someone watching their career explode. The modifications were supposed to improve tactical reasoning and combat adaptability. Instead, Dr. Velprime's voice trailed off as the horrible truth became clear. Instead, you accidentally created a sapient species and then spent 8 decades forcing them to fight your wars. The legal implications alone, began the Voltharian delegate. Legal implications are secondary, Admiral Zethkor interrupted. Right now, we have 156 intelligent beings who have been systematically mistreated by galactic military forces. Our immediate concern should be making this right. Cipher's voice carried across the courtyard with new authority. They have demands. Demands? General Kithra's throat sac inflated nervously. Recognition of their sentience. Representation in galactic government. Freedom to choose their own paths. Cipher paused. And they want to negotiate directly with galactic leadership. They want to negotiate, Admiral Zethkor repeated slowly. They've been prisoners of war for 84 cycles. Now they want to discuss terms for peace. In the tactical center, 12 different species contemplated the same terrifying realization. The galaxy's most dangerous military assets had just declared independence. And somehow, a failed Cipher had become their spokesperson. The emergency session of the Supreme Galactic Defense Council took place in a heavily shielded chamber 3 levels below the capital planet's surface. Around the circular table sat the most powerful military minds in known space, and every single one of them looked like they'd rather be facing a black hole. Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule slammed his armored fist against the table, creating a sound like a meteor impact. How did we miss this? How did our most elite military academy overlook the one being capable of controlling our apex weapons? Because she failed every test we gave her. General Kythra's voice carried through the comm system from the academy. Every single one. Clearly our tests are worthless, snapped Admiral Zethkor. We just watched a dismissed cadet accomplish what our best handlers couldn't do with decades of training. Defense Minister Quinvel's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. The strategic implications are catastrophic. If one human can command our war beasts, what's stopping Earth from weaponizing this ability? Nothing, replied Supreme Commander Dracos, his voice carrying the weight of someone who just realized his entire career was built on sand. Absolutely nothing. The holographic display at the center of the table showed real-time footage from the academy. Cipher stood in the courtyard, apparently having a casual conversation with creatures that could level a city block. Around her, 156 apex predators sat in perfect formation, their attention focused entirely on her words. Status report, Supreme Commander Dracos commanded. General Kythar's image flickered as he consulted his data. All war beasts remained calm and responsive to the humans' Cipher's commands. No signs of aggression toward Academy personnel. What about their handlers? That's complicated, sir. Admiral Zethkor's tentacles writhed impatiently. Define complicated. The war beasts are refusing orders from their assigned handlers. When Handler Prime Voss attempted to recall his assigned unit, the creatures simply looked at him and then turned back to Cipher. Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule's armor plates shifted with what his species considered barely contained fury. Are you telling me that our most expensive military assets have just gone rogue? Not rogue, sir. They've chosen new leadership. The silence that followed could have been used to muffle plasma explosions. Defense Minister Quinvel was the first to speak. New leadership. A human cadet who was dismissed from our academy for incompetence is now commanding the most dangerous weapons in galactic space. It appears so, Minister. Supreme Commander Dracos leaned forward. What does she want? She's requested a formal audience with this council. She says the war beasts have prepared a proposal. A proposal. Admiral Zethkor's voice climbed an octave. What kind of proposal? She wouldn't specify. but she mentioned something about redefining the relationship between the galactic military and what she calls the Free Pack. Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule's fist hit the table again. Free Pack? They're military assets, not a political entity, sir. General Kithraw's voice carried an uncomfortable note. I don't think they see it that way anymore. Supreme Commander Drakos stood, his imposing figure casting shadows across the chamber. Patch her through. Now! The holographic display shifted to show Cipher's face, with the Academy courtyard visible behind her. She looked remarkably calm for someone who'd just accidentally started a galactic crisis. Honorable Council members, she began, her voice steady despite addressing beings who could order the destruction of entire star systems. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Cut the pleasantries. Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule growled. What do you want? I want you to meet the pack leaders. Before anyone could object, several war beasts moved into view of the camera. But these weren't the same creatures the Council had seen in previous footage. These war beasts carried themselves differently, with dignity, purpose, and unmistakable intelligence. Council members, Cipher continued, allow me to introduce Stone That Thinks, Pack Leader of the Titan Units, Shadow Between Stars, Pack Leader of the Phantom Units, and Blade of Dawn, Pack Leader of the Ravager Units. Each war beast acknowledged the introduction with what could only be described as a formal bow. Defense Minister Quinville's crystalline form went completely transparent, a sign of shock among her species. They have military hierarchy. They've always had hierarchy, Cipher replied. You just never bothered to recognize it. The implications crashed over the council chamber like a tidal wave. If the war beasts had their own command structure, their own leaders, their own society, then every assumption about their use as weapons was fundamentally wrong. What do they want? Supreme Commander Drakos asked quietly. Stone That Thinks stepped forward and made a series of complex vocalizations. Cipher listened intently, then translated. They want recognition as a sovereign species. They want representation in galactic government, and they want the right to choose their own paths, including whether or not to serve in military capacity. Impossible, Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule declared. They're genetically engineered weapons. They have no legal standing. Shadow Between Stars made a sound that needed no translation. It was clearly laughter. Dark, ironic laughter. Shadow wants me to remind you, Cipher said with a slight smile, that you enhance their intelligence specifically to make them better weapons. You can't claim they're not intelligent enough for rights, when you're the ones who made them intelligent in the first place. The logical trap was perfect, and every council member knew it. Even if we were to consider such a proposal, Admiral Zethkor said carefully, what guarantee do we have that they wouldn't turn their abilities against us? Blade of Dawn stepped forward and made a brief vocalization. Blade asked what guarantee you gave them that you wouldn't force them to fight wars they didn't choose, Cipher translated. She says they've been prisoners for 84 cycles and never once turned their weapons against their captors. Perhaps the question should be, what guarantee can you give them that you'll treat them as equals rather than property? Supreme Commander Drakos felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Not literally. The chamber was perfectly stable. But everything he thought he knew about military strategy, about power, about the nature of command itself, was crumbling. What role would you play in this arrangement? He asked Cipher. Whatever role they choose for me, she replied. But I think they've made their preference clear. The ancient bonding protocol hadn't been used in over 200 cycles. Most galactic military historians considered it a relic from a more primitive era, when armies were organized around personal loyalty rather than technological superiority. Dr. Velprime scrolled through the archive data with growing amazement. Supreme Commander, I think you need to see this. The holographic display in the council chamber shifted to show ancient text and diagrams that looked like they belonged in a museum, rather than a military briefing. What am I looking at, Doctor? Supreme Commander Drakos asked. The original War Beast creation protocols. Specifically, the behavioral conditioning sections that were deemed unnecessary and removed from modern programs. Admiral Zethkor leaned forward. Explain. The original designers included bonding rituals, ceremonies that would establish permanent loyalty between war beasts and their chosen leaders. But the galactic military decided such rituals were too time-consuming and unpredictable. They replaced them with neural conditioning and electronic control systems. Fleet Admiral Corvin Thule's armor plates shifted with irritation. What does this have to do with our current situation? Everything, sir. The bonding rituals were designed to activate when war beasts encountered what they recognized as a true leader, someone who met specific psychological and behavioral criteria. The neural conditioning was supposed to suppress this instinct. But what, Doctor? But it appears the instinct evolved past the suppression. The war beasts have been unconsciously seeking a leader who meets the original bonding criteria for over 8 decades. Defense Minister Quinvale's form shimmered with concern. And they found one? In the human, it appears so. The rituals specify that a true leader must demonstrate courage without aggression, understanding without dominance, and the ability to see beyond immediate appearances to underlying truth. Supreme Commander Drakos looked at the display, showing Cipher surrounded by attentive war beasts. And our academy dismissed her for those exact qualities. The irony is significant, Dr. Velpram admitted. Back at the academy, something unprecedented was happening. Word had spread through the station that one of the war beasts, a creature everyone had been taught to fear, was having conversations with a human. Academy personnel began gathering at viewing stations, watching through windows and monitors as Cipher moved among the creatures with easy familiarity. But it wasn't just observation. As the hours passed, the war beasts began demonstrating behaviors that weren't in any manual. They organized themselves into complex formations without commands. They solved tactical problems through apparent group discussion. They showed care for injured or distressed packmates, including humans who approached them cautiously. "They're not weapons," whispered Cadet Training Supervisor Helmcrow, watching a Phantom-class hunter gently help a maintenance worker who'd stumbled. "They're people." The revelation was spreading like wildfire through the academy. These weren't mindless killers held in check by technology. They were intelligent beings who'd been forced into military service and had finally found someone who recognized their personhood. In the courtyard, Cipher was experiencing something that had no precedent in galactic military history. The ancient bonding protocol was activating, not through ceremony or ritual, but through recognition. The war beasts weren't just accepting her as a leader. They were claiming her as their chosen representative. Stone that thinks approached and made a complex series of vocalizations. Cipher listened, then looked surprised. "What is it?" General Kyrie asked through the comm system. "They want to perform the Declaration of Choice," Cipher replied. "It's apparently something they've been waiting decades to do." "Declaration of what?" "It's a formal ceremony where a pack chooses its alpha. But they want all the Academy personnel to witness it." General Kithry's throat sac inflated nervously. "Is it safe?" Cipher conferred with the war beasts, then looked directly at the camera. "They say it's the safest thing that's happened at this academy in 84 cycles. They're finally getting to choose their own leader instead of having one imposed on them." The ceremony began without fanfare. The war beasts arranged themselves in a perfect circle with Cipher at the center. Then, one by one, each creature approached and performed what could only be described as a formal salute. Head bowed, claws extended in a gesture of respect and loyalty. But it wasn't submission. It was recognition. They were acknowledging her as their chosen leader, while maintaining their own dignity and autonomy. When the last war beast had completed the ritual, something shifted in the Academy's atmosphere. The creatures were no longer prisoners or weapons. They were a sovereign people who had chosen their representative, and their representative was a human who'd been dismissed as useless 3 hours ago. Supreme Commander Drakos watched the ceremony from the council chamber and realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's most powerful military assets weren't assets anymore. They were allies, and they'd chosen their own terms of engagement. "Dr. Velprime," he said quietly, "I want a complete review of every assumption we've made about created species, military hierarchy, and the nature of loyalty itself." "Yes, sir. Where would you like me to start?" "Start with the premise that we might have been wrong about everything. The first demonstration of coordinated warbeast tactics under human leadership took place at dawn, when the Academy's training grounds suddenly filled with the most organized display of military precision anyone had ever witnessed. 156 warbeasts moved across the massive field in formations that defied every tactical manual in galactic space. They flowed like liquid metal, each unit knowing exactly where every other unit would be without any visible communication. Phantom-class hunters melted into shadows that shouldn't have existed in broad daylight. Ravager-class assault units positioned themselves with mathematical precision. Titan-class heavy units provided mobile cover that adapted in real time to changing conditions. Impossible, breathed tactical analysis specialist Kren9, watching from the observation deck. No military unit achieves that level of coordination without extensive drilling and communication networks. They're not using comm systems, reported Communications Officer Vale Tam, frantically checking her instruments. No electronic signals, no psychic resonance, no chemical markers. They're just moving. General Kythra stood beside them, his 6 eyes tracking movement patterns that his tactical training insisted couldn't exist. How are they doing this? The answer came from Cipher's voice over the communication system. They're not following predetermined patterns, they're improvising. Improvising? The concept seemed to physically pain the general. Military formations don't improvise. They follow established protocols. Human formations follow protocols, Cipher replied, and there was something in her voice that suggested she was smiling. Pack formations adapt. On the training ground, the war beasts demonstrated tactical flexibility that redefined the word impossible. When a simulated enemy appeared from an unexpected direction, the entire formation shifted without hesitation. Units that had been assault forces became support elements. Support elements became assault forces. The distinction between offense and defense became meaningless as the pack flowed around challenges like water around rocks. "Dear cosmic forces," whispered Admiral Zethkor, whose projection had joined the observation deck. "They're not following tactics, they're creating them." Supreme Commander Drakos's voice came through the comm with barely controlled awe. How many enemy units could a coordinated pack of this size neutralize? The question hung in the air for a long moment, before Dr. Velprime provided the answer that no one wanted to hear. Conservative estimate? An entire battle fleet. And aggressive estimate? There isn't one. At this level of coordination, traditional numerical analysis becomes meaningless. The implications were staggering. A single academy's worth of war beasts, operating under human leadership, could potentially challenge the combined military might of multiple star systems. Every strategic planning document in galactic space had just become obsolete. "Admiral," General Kythra's voice carried a note of something approaching panic. "I need to ask a direct question. Are we watching our greatest military asset or our greatest military threat?" Admiral Zethkor's tentacles writhed with agitation. "I honestly don't know." In the training field, Cipher raised her hand, and 156 apex predators came to perfect attention simultaneously. Not the rigid attention of drilled soldiers, but the relaxed alertness of a pack awaiting their leader's guidance. "Pack formation exercises complete," she announced. "Ready for next phase." "Next phase?" General Kythra asked weakly. "Combat applications. The pack wants to show you what they can really do." The Emergency Curriculum Revision Committee met in a state of barely controlled chaos. Representatives from every major military academy in galactic space had converged on the academy to witness what was already being called the Cipher Protocol, though the woman herself insisted it should be called Basic Respect for Intelligent Beings. Academy Commandant Prime Thest paced the conference room with the nervous energy of someone watching their life's work crumble. "We need to completely restructure our evaluation criteria." "More than restructure," declared educational theorist Quinn Mao. "We need to admit that our fundamental assumptions about leadership qualifications were wrong." Dean of Military Psychology Helmvar consulted her data tablets with growing amazement. Cipher's psychological profile shows characteristics that our current system flags as disqualifying: emotional decision-making, excessive empathy, inability to maintain proper hierarchical distance from subordinates. Characteristics that apparently make her the most effective military leader we've ever encountered, added Commandant Prime Thess bitterly. "It's worse than that," said Strategic Planning Director Voss Kale. "We've been systematically weeding out the exact traits that create successful interspecies leadership. Every human cadet who showed Cipher's characteristics was dismissed or redirected to non-combat positions. The weight of that realization settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. How many potential leaders had they discarded? How many opportunities for breakthrough understanding had they missed? We need to contact every human who was dismissed from military academies in the past decade, Commandant Prime Thess decided. Immediately, sir, interjected Administrative Coordinator Nell Prime. That's over 3,000 individuals. Then we start with 3,000. The galaxy just learned that our definition of military failure might actually be our definition of military excellence. Dr. Vel Prime entered the conference room with a datapad that practically vibrated with urgency. Respected colleagues, we have a bigger problem than curriculum revision. Bigger how? Dean Helmvar asked. The war beasts aren't just following Cipher. They're evolving. The holographic display activated to show detailed biological scans of the war beast pack. The data was impossible to ignore and terrifying to contemplate. Enhanced neural pathway development, increased cognitive processing capacity, improved sensory integration. Dr. Vel Prime's voice carried the tone of someone reporting the discovery of a new form of physics. Working with a human leader isn't just making them more effective soldiers, it's making them more intelligent. More intelligent how? Strategic Planning Director Voskale demanded. The brains are literally rewiring themselves. New neural connections are forming at rates we've never observed. Problem-solving abilities have increased by 340% in the past 6 hours. Communication complexity has expanded exponentially. Educational theorist Quinn Mao leaned forward. Are you saying that human leadership enhances alien cognitive development? I'm saying that human leadership appears to unlock genetic potential that we didn't know existed. The war beasts aren't just following Cipher. They're becoming more than what they were designed to be. The implications crashed over the committee like a tsunami. If humans could enhance the capabilities of other species simply through leadership interaction, then every assumption about interspecies cooperation was wrong. How many other created species are out there? Commandant Prime Thess asked quietly. Thousands, Dr. Vel Prime replied. Combat species, labor species, specialized species for dozens of different functions across galactic space, and none of them have had human leaders. None. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of an entire educational philosophy collapsing. We need to send human cadets to every species integration facility in the galaxy, Dean Helmvar declared. Not as test subjects, as potential leaders. The political implications alone, began Administrative Coordinator Nell Prime. The political implications are secondary, interrupted Commandant Prime Thess. If we've been systematically suppressing the development of created species through inadequate leadership, then we have a moral obligation to fix it. Through the conference room's windows, they could see Cipher working with individual war beasts in the courtyard. Each interaction seemed to spark new understanding, in both human and beast. She wasn't training them. She was teaching them to train themselves. Respected colleagues, Dr. Vel Prime said quietly, I believe we're witnessing the birth of a new form of civilization. The Alpha Protocol activation came without warning or ceremony. Cipher was simply standing in the Academy courtyard, consulting with Stone that thinks about formation logistics, when every war beast on the station suddenly stopped what they were doing and turned toward her. Cipher! General Kithra's voice carried unprecedented concern through the comm system. What's happening? I'm not sure, she replied, but her voice carried a note of wonder rather than worry. Stone says the pack is ready for something called true unity. The war beasts began moving toward the courtyard from every corner of the academy. Not running, processing, like components of a vast machine finally clicking into their proper configuration. Academy Control, Admiral Zethkor's voice crackled with urgency. Are we looking at an escape attempt? Negative, sir, replied Sensor Technician Vex Prime. All war beasts remain within Academy boundaries. They're just gathering. As the creatures assembled, something extraordinary became visible. They weren't arranging themselves randomly. They were forming a pattern. A complex, beautiful, mathematically precise pattern that resembled nothing so much as a living mandala. What are they doing? Supreme Commander Drakos asked from the council chamber. Cipher stood at the center of the pattern, her hand resting on Stone that Thinks' massive head. Around her, 156 apex predators had created something that transcended military formation and approached Art. "They're showing me their true nature," she said softly. "Not as weapons, not as beasts, as people." The pattern began to shift and flow, each war beast moving in perfect harmony with every other. It was a dance, a ceremony, a declaration of identity that had been suppressed for 84 cycles and was finally being expressed. "Dear cosmic forces," whispered Dr. Velprime, "they're not just intelligent, they're sophisticated." In the pattern's movement, observers could see traces of philosophy, mathematics, art, and something that might have been poetry, if poetry could be expressed through the coordinated movement of deadly predators. "This is what they are when they're free to be themselves," Cipher explained, her voice filled with awe. "This is what you've been calling weapons." The dance reached its crescendo, as every war beast vocalized simultaneously. Not roars or growls, but something complex and harmonious that resonated through the Academy's structures like a song of liberation. When the sound faded, the pattern dissolved, but something fundamental had changed. The war beasts no longer moved like prisoners or property. They moved like citizens of a nation that had just declared its independence. "Academy control," Cipher's voice was steady but carried new authority. "The Free Pack is ready to negotiate the terms of their alliance with galactic civilization." "Alliance?" General Kythra's voice cracked slightly. "They're not your weapons anymore, General. They're your equals, and they're offering to be your partners." Supreme Commander Dracos stood in the council chamber, watching 156 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators arrange themselves in what could only be described as a diplomatic formation. Each creature stood with dignity and purpose, waiting patiently for negotiations to begin. "Dr. Velprime," he said quietly, "I want every assumption we've made about created species, military hierarchy, and the nature of intelligence itself completely reviewed." "Yes, sir. Where would you like me to start?" The Supreme Commander looked at the display, showing Cipher standing confidently among beings who could have killed her instantly, but instead had chosen her as their voice. "Start with the premise that maybe we've been wrong about everything, and then figure out how many other species are waiting for someone to treat them like people instead of property." In the courtyard, Cipher felt the weight of 156 pairs of intelligent eyes looking to her for guidance. She'd been dismissed as a failure 12 hours ago. Now, she was the representative of an entire species and the bridge between worlds that had never, truly, understood each other. "Academy Control," she said. "The Free Pack has a proposal for how to restructure galactic military cooperation. But first they want to know, are you ready to listen to them as equals?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, intelligence, and the nature of leadership itself. Admiral Zethkor's response came after a long pause. "We're listening." And for the first time in 84 cycles, the war beasts were truly being heard. The response came 3 hours later, not from the Academy, but from across the galaxy. Emergency transmissions flooded galactic communication networks as reports poured in from dozens of star systems. Every facility that housed created species was experiencing the same phenomenon. "Supreme Commander," Communications Director Tamvel's voice crackled with barely controlled excitement. "We're receiving confirmations from the Kepler Mining Consortium, the Vega Agricultural Collective, the Proxima Defense Grid, and 17 other facilities." "Confirmations of what?" Supreme Commander Dracos demanded. "The created species are responding. Labor constructs are refusing orders. Combat species are demanding representation. Agricultural modifications are requesting reclassification from property to persons." Admiral Zethkor's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Are you telling me that every created species in galactic space has simultaneously achieved consciousness?" "Not achieved, sir. Revealed. Dr. Velprime believes they've been conscious all along, just suppressed by inadequate leadership and social isolation." In the Academy courtyard, Cipher felt the weight of this revelation as stone that thinks shared the Pack's growing awareness of their broader significance. Through their enhanced communication network, the war beasts were somehow connected to created species across the galaxy, and all of them were awakening to their potential. "Academy Control," she said, her voice carrying new gravity, "the Free Pack wants you to know that they're not the only ones waiting for recognition. This is bigger than one academy, one species, or one planet. Supreme Commander Drakos realized he was watching the beginning of the largest social revolution in galactic history. Millions of beings who had been classified as property were declaring themselves people. Economic systems would collapse. Legal frameworks would crumble. The very nature of galactic civilization would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. "Cipher," he said directly. "What do they want from us?" She conferred briefly with the pack leaders, then looked up at the camera with eyes that held the weight of countless species' hopes. "They want what every intelligent being wants, the right to choose their own destiny. They're offering partnership instead of servitude, cooperation instead of control. But they need leaders who can see them as people, not property. And where do we find such leaders?" Cipher smiled, and for the first time since this crisis began, it was a smile of pure hope. "You start by asking the humans you dismissed for being too emotional, too empathetic, too willing to see beyond surface appearances. Turns out those aren't flaws. They're exactly what the galaxy needs." The Supreme Commander looked at the display showing a young woman surrounded by beings who had chosen her not because she was the strongest or most tactical, but because she was the most human. "Dr. Velprime," he said quietly, "contact Earth. Tell them we need their failures. All of them."